Well, welcome to the Beyond Sundays podcast. We are so excited that you're joining us today for episode 3 of our Think Ahead series. I am so delighted. I have 2 special guests in the studio with me today. I have Danny and Stephanie Ellison with me today. How are you guys doing today?
We're good.
Doing well.
Glad to be here. Very glad to be here.
Glad that you're here as well. Thank you for making time. Before we dive into talking about this week's topic, would you mind sharing a little bit about who you are and family and those kinds of things, what you do?
So I actually am a speaker across the country. I go into foster care agencies, adoption, and schools, and I talk with them about how to work with and love on our kids from difficult places. And I share my story and hope to encourage and inspire the world with, just the power of love and community. And then I have 5 daughters and a boy dog and a bird and a hamster named
Full
Stormy.
house.
So yeah, I love getting to do that, and that's a pretty new venture for me. And then I'll let Danny tell you what he does.
Yeah. I work at Hendrick Home for Children. I am an LPC. I am a program director there, and I lead some of our therapeutic recreation offerings. I oversee the equine program, and we do all kinds of different therapeutic work with horses. That's been an interesting kind of turn in my career. I, grew up with horses occasionally in my life, but it's really neat to kind of have that component back and be able to utilize them as therapeutic partners to help the kids and the parents that we work with process life and whatever they're dealing with. So I've worked there for going on 4 years now, and I think that's about it. That's about what I do. Yep.
Oh, and we've been married for 17 years.
Yeah, 17
wow.
years.
Congrats.
So,
That's awesome.
yeah.
And I know you're pretty musical.
Yes.
You play a lot of instruments.
I am. I don't get to do. I mean, I can always go there and pick it up and play. It's just something that is really natural for me.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times people can, if you walk away from the piano and you forget everything you ever knew, and then you can't play anymore. That never really was my story. I can put the violin down and pick it back up and kind of be where I was. But right now I haven't really played a whole lot in the past probably half decade.
Well, your lives are very, very full. I mean, 5 daughters, all the things, the traveling, and just all the stuff that you got going on. So it's a lot. It's a lot, but thank you so much for taking time today to come into the studio and have a conversation with me. I really, really, really appreciate it. So I would love to begin, Stephanie, with your story, because when I thought about the topic of, we're talking about the topic of devotion, and what does it look like to be devoted person, right, to the things that you are called to be devoted to. And I know that your story is one with many twists and turns and a hard road. So I would love for you to share your journey of becoming a follower of Jesus, if you don't mind beginning there.
Yeah, I don't mind at all. Right before I was a follower of Jesus, I actually had a very turbulent upbringing. My father was incarcerated. He went to prison when I was 5. My birth mother struggled with addiction. We were in and out of foster care and really just battled with kind of abandonment and neglect and abuse and all of those things throughout my entire childhood. And when I was 15 years old, I became a runaway homeless youth after my mother attempted to murder me. And when I ran away, I called people from the community that had fed me when I was hungry and helped me when I was struggling. And they answered the call and they picked up the phone and they helped me transition from abuse to adulthood very quickly. I ended up filing for emancipation and was legally emancipated at 16, worked 3 jobs, went to school, and was just kind of, at that point in my life, I was drifting is kind of how I see it. Even though there were good people, I was trying to do it all on my own.
Sure. It's hard.
And so it was very difficult. I was working 3 jobs, trying to pay all the bills, trying to prove something like that I could do this on my own. And I was very, I struggled a lot with that. And one of my jobs, at the Burleson Chamber of Commerce, I met this girl, and she was basically everything I wasn't. She was supported by 2 parents. She was very popular in school. She was a cheerleader. Had a really good group of friends, very outgoing. And she actually invited me to church and several times. And I finally one day said, okay, I'll go with you, And they actually did this thing called ambush night. And these are 2 separate nights. The first night I went to church and the ambush night. But I just want to say the ambush night was where they invite an unchurched youth to eat a meal at a restaurant.
Okay.
So it kind of takes the barrier of the church out.
Sure.
But the whole youth group comes, or as many people as who can. And it was on a Tuesday, and they all surrounded me, and I was kind of in the middle. I didn't realize that it was kind of a mission, I didn't know what that was at that time. I just knew that there was free food. And so anyway, they invited me in, and they called it ambush because they ambushed you with the love of Christ. And basically they just were interested in who I was. Of course, I was 2 different people. Like, I wanted to be a pleaser and a good person, but then I had this other life that was full of twists and turns and unhealthy relationships. And I wanted to, not be alone. And so I had that darker side. But I was seeing this light side, this brightness. And so I was interested in what those people had, and they kept pursuing me and invited me in and loved me unconditionally. And even though I didn't believe that I was worth it, they decided to invite me in. And her mom and dad found out I was living by myself in this little trailer in Alvarado, Texas. And, they were like, why are you living by yourself? What if, you could come and instead of working 3 jobs, you could live with us. We have an extra room, and you could have a normal school experience. And so then they invited me in to live with them, and I lived with them right before my senior year. And so my entire senior year, I got to have like a normal kind of senior year in high school, and it was really great. And they loved on me and encouraged me and mentored me to go forward. And I remember it was their unconditional love and their lack of judgment and their kindness and compassion towards me that when the pastor, because I didn't understand the Bible, it was boring. I felt like it was written by a man who was really intelligent, and I didn't fit in, understanding of that. I didn't understand the history of it. And so when they invited me in and invited me to church, I wasn't really interested in this, in scriptures. I was interested in the love that people were pouring into me. And that is what opened the door to understanding of what God was doing in my heart.
Yeah.
These people weren't perfect, right. But they just loved me where I was. And one day I remember telling Mom, because that's who I call my mom and dad now. I remember telling her, some of my darker moments. And I remember feeling like if I tell her who I really am, she's not going to love me. And she held me. And I remember her holding me and just loving me right there. And it's not what I expected. I expected her to be scared of me. I expected her to push me away, and she didn't. And so because of that, it allowed me an opportunity to say, I want to grow. And I remember the day I accepted Christ, the pastor was talking about the love of Jesus, and he was talking about what that feels like and how all of your sins, all of the things that you feel like you've done too wrong, which going into the church, I thought it would probably fall down if I walked in. Like I really, really felt like my sins were too great.
Yeah.
And the beauty about Jesus is your sins are never too great.
That's right.
They're never too big. They're never too dark. They're never too awful. You can release those burdens and not feel that because there's no condemnation. Mm-hmm. And so the conviction happened within, and all of that came out, and so, and it's taken a long time to heal from like trauma and all the stuff growing up, but like that love and that understanding that, okay, no, and coming back to and being grounded by the foundation of the love of Christ is a very defining moment in my life. So I'm very grateful. But that's how I always say it was like a Saul to Paul, like the scales were lifted and I know it's a totally different story, but like I realized what faith was to me, what hope was, what love was, who Jesus was. And even here at Beltway, whenever I came to college, because I was just still a brand new Christian in 2003 when I came here, I had only really been studying and learning about God for a year and a half. And so when I came here, I felt he was too big.
Yeah.
And I remember one day I was like, I'm not going to go back, because I was going to the college ministry. And I was like, it's just too big. And then I felt in my spirit, go for 3 months. And if after 3 months you feel like it's still too big, then, maybe you move on.
Yeah.
But it was because of the intentional love of the people pouring into my life and allowing me time to grow, because I didn't have the foundation growing up, so it's been a beautiful, beautiful process. It's been beautiful knowing that being devoted and to the Lord is just a matter of working on your own heart. Absolutely. Not trying to change anybody else or what it's working on who you are and who he created you to be.
Yeah. As
imperfect as we are as humans, and I've had to learn, it's not about perfection. It's about being here. It's about being consistent and turning to him. In your, times of trouble and in your times of joy and and
absolutely.
all of it. And giving, being grateful for what he's given.
And I know in a previous conversation you and I had that there have been real markers where you just knew, I know he's real. He has been so faithful. Can you share just a couple of those real quick? And then I'm going to ask Danny a follow-up question.
So one that I can think of is my daughter, Molly, was born, she's amazing, but she was born with sleep struggles, right? Every child, which to me, she was my first, child that I birthed. And so I didn't know that her not sleeping through the night for the first 3 years of her life, that was like not normal,
Yeah.
I tried to, seek out help on that, but the doctors just kept assuring me, you're just worried, you're just anxious,
Yeah.
And
there's nothing wrong.
Yeah. And then one day I took her in and I just said, I know something's wrong, because last night I had my hand on her chest and she wasn't breathing. She stopped breathing while she fell asleep. And I don't know, I'm not a doctor. But I know something's wrong. And they sent her for a sleep study. And sure enough, she was actually diagnosed with central sleep apnea, which is very, very rare with babies, with kids. They said he had never seen anything like that. And anyway, in her, apparently like her central nervous system was not telling her to breathe at night. And I remember being terrified when I got the results that she had central sleep apnea. And we got a mat for her bed and, with alarms. And if she stopped breathing, it would just alert us. So we basically still didn't sleep. And one night, one night we were so tired, but we came to church the next day and we're sitting at the top in the very back. Molly's next to me. And I said to Danny, I'm going to go pray with her because I'm tired.
Yeah.
And so he said, okay. And I walked down with her, and Rebecca Porter prayed for her and me. She put her hands on her head and she prayed. And that night she slept through the night fully. And I sent a text to Rebecca. I still have it in my text messages. And a couple months later, I had to take her in to Cook's to get another scan and get all these things just to make sure. And she had been sleeping through the night from then on.
Wow.
And so anyway, when we went in, they did everything, all the, things that they normally do. And the doctor looked at me and said, "It's gone. She's healed." Mm-hmm. And I remember that day. Because the doctor said there's no fix for it. Mm-hmm. When they diagnosed her, there was no fix. So you're like, is she going to die? Yeah. You're just afraid every night, so I just had to put my faith in he's got this, she's his. So she went through a trauma that I couldn't fix. Yeah. It's not like it was something that happened to her that I could fix. It was something that was happening in her that I couldn't fix. So I had to give it to God. Yeah. And we went through a lot with that. Danny was like, she slept through the night after that. She did. It's undeniable. I know what was going on in my life, and I can't even explain it, and I still think it's crazy. I'm not going to lie.
Sometimes miracles are.
Exactly. And I've never been that. Yes.
Yeah. But God is so faithful.
Yes.
And, there are so many things we can't explain because our brains, we really just can't wrap our heads around an infinite God and who has a grand story that he's writing in all of our lives. And so, fantastic. Man, it is so beautiful, to hear your story, but to also know that there was a cost to following Jesus. Yeah. There's always a cost to following Jesus. Jesus lays that out in Luke 14. He says there are terms for discipleship. You give your life, for the sake of who he is. And, in Luke 14, it talks about there are a lot of crowds that were following him. Everyone wanted the miracle, but they didn't want the miracle worker, right? Mm-hmm. They wanted what he could do rather than who he was. And so much of discipleship is it's wanting to love him. It's wanting to be with him. It's relationship, right?
Absolutely.
And when you became a believer, you had to count the cost of following Jesus and what that could look like. And as you mentioned, there were seasons of just learning and growing and being immersed in his love through people, but also in your own personal walk with Jesus. So I'm going to transition, though, to hearing from Danny, because I know y'all met 17 years ago or 18 years ago.
It's been 17.
17 years. Yeah. Okay, and then you got married.
Yes, we met and married in how many months?
Very quickly. 5 months. Yeah, we were.
And we didn't have our first child till 5 years later. I'm just.
Yeah, we were. Yeah. That's a whole other story. But
right.
We never even declared that we were boyfriend and girlfriend.
There was no.
We just knew, and we marched forward.
There was no DTR.
No,
it happened.
And we didn't
it was
have
a very
Facebook.
organic, natural.
We had MySpace at that point. That was back then.
MySpace. We wrote each other, "Hi, it was very nice to meet you."
And then the debacle happened, and we lost all of our early communication. And so, one of the tragedies of living your life in the digital world. But 17 years. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I know that you have a long journey too, a journey that you've had and walked from meeting Stephanie even. Could you go into sharing a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, I can. I always love talking after her because I just feel like you have this expectation. I'm about to bring it way down.
It's okay to say that I was a dumpster fire when you met me. I'm just kidding. Those were my words. Yeah, I still had a lot of healing to do. He was still working on me. It doesn't just automatically. There's a lot of things that happen like that.
Yeah.
Change of heart and, all that. But it doesn't just go away like the, you have to let him work on you.
When I met her, she was ready. Her heart was ready to go change the world, do something, take her story that she had lived through and been given, and do something with it. In fact, we believe that that was part of her processing. The story is ascribing meaning to it, and then doing something with it that would allow her to feel like it would change other people's lives. She had to
Sure.
endure it, but she wanted to share it in order for other people not to have to endure
Yeah.
that, or to frame what they might be enduring. She has always been consistent with that kind of passion for her life. But I remember telling her, she's wants to do this, but she's not ready, to do that. It's not time. You haven't gotten to a healthy spot with all of that to start getting up on a stage and melting
I was mad
down.
at him for that.
And she was very upset with me. And our relationship wasn't that I had some sort of authority and I determined
Right.
what direction we went. We're not that kind of a couple, but so it took a lot of courage to to say, hey, hold your horses. We're not ready for Africa yet, or whatever
Yeah.
it is. I don't know at the time. It was a lot of stuff, and we kind of settled into the rhythm of life together. We met and married in such a short amount of time, committing to one another, very much, committed to the idea of loving each other indefinitely. But what we didn't know was how difficult that was going to be, because there was no way in a 5-month period of time I could have known the impact of all of that trauma. In fact, in my mind, I thought, okay, give her a house with maybe a concrete foundation here. Let's. I work at a church. This is kind of a career job for me at the time. It was, and that stability that I thought I had. Which was way early in my career. So I look back on it and go, yeah, we were still pretty unstable, career-wise. But I thought, that's kind of going to fill the void for her. She can breathe. She can realize that life won't shift from this point forward, and we'll be that couple, raised Abby and Emma. We had Molly, Willow, and Kelsey, and we. I don't know. I just idealized what life would be. I felt like it would be easy at that point, because I'm all about, believe it or not, I'm all about an easy life. I want life to be predictable and easy
and make sense.
And make sense. And I don't mean I don't have a work ethic. I work very hard, but I want it to be
Peaceful.
simple and peaceful. Yeah.
I think that
and
would be
she
the
was
word.
not very peaceful.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
That's
She had a
fine.
lot of turmoil,
Absolutely
a
true.
lot of beliefs about herself that caused her to have difficulty engaging with other people in a way that, for me, I thought, well, this should be easy. Like simple things like being a part of a life group or having close friends. She has healed. Has very close friends now, but back then, everything was seen through the lens of that trauma, and I didn't understand it. I didn't realize back then, how it had impacted her.
And it's interesting because I would find myself frustrated at, well, Jesus was supposed to fix it all, right? Like, so you still have work to do when you're, when you come out of a life without him to a life with him. There's a lot of work to do. He fixes all, but he walks with you. through it, so
healing
you're not
is a
alone.
journey.
I think you end up on a path.
Yeah,
at
it's a
that point.
journey. But you don't think that. Like, you want to idealize it that it's so much easier than that.
And that it's instant.
Yeah, that it's instant, because you do. There is a very strong feeling when you encounter the love of Christ. That way, it's a very strong feeling and emotion. And when that is gone, when it's like the hard work begins, it you have to cling to what he tells you.
I think if I could transition from that to kind of my journey at that point, I'm at that point, Christianity itself had been an easy journey because it had been wrapped up in the walls of a church. I came up through high school having that was part of my life. Growing up, I knew the language and I knew what was expected.
Sure.
I pretty much knew what the preacher would preach about and how it would feel to hear a sermon. And I was very comfortable in the church. I wanted to be in the ministry, and I kind of moved forward in that direction. But and I did, for 7 or 8 years, serve in the ministry here in Abilene. But roughly 2010, 2011, 2012. I started to go through an internal process of picking apart what I had grown up in. I call it deconstructing my faith. You know, I had gone through. I had reached a point in life where this is more challenging than I ever thought it could be, and this over here is a facade. This idea of being a Christian is like, well, there's really, you know, I mean, we're all Christian. We live in America, in Texas, and Abilene. I mean, you kind of have to have a job, you know. That it just kind of boiled down to that for me. It became pretty, void of any meaning. So I grew really frustrated with it because it wasn't, you know, making life easy like I had hoped for, you know, in our relationship. So growing frustrated, I began to ask questions that I wouldn't allow myself to ask when I was in the ministry and expected to be a thing, a kind of person, a leader in the church. I looking back, I believe I had the questions all along. I believe I had the issues with the faith, but I was too comfortable in it to shake it up and examine it. So I went through a few years of reading books that I would have never read, of looking at perspectives that I would have never looked at, and of just pulling completely away from the idea of being a Christian. I won't label myself. I really. I wasn't a fan of becoming another thing. I was a fan of pulling out of this thing so that I could look at it from a distance, more anthropologically than experientially. You know, what does it look like? What was I, and how foolish was that in terms of what we know as human beings at this point? I thought a lot in those years about science, which in my upbringing, science and religion were diametrically opposed to one another. You couldn't honor science and honor, I'll say religion in this context, because I don't mean faith. I don't mean something real. I just mean it's following a set of rules in order to appear to be a thing out there. And so I dove very deeply into that world. The words atheism, the words agnosticism, we shouldn't leave out of this conversation, although I don't want to label myself as any of that. Yeah. But I grew very close to those ideologies, or is there a God? Is there not a God? What is this all about?
Questions.
Yeah, questions that I think I had the right to ask. I was just too afraid to.
Sure.
At one point in my life. I came to her and I said, and I wasn't on this journey with her. I was on this journey on my Kindle and in books and in my own thought life. And I remember in 2015, I came to her and my hope was, I'm going to share with you everything that I'm going through, because it was liberating to me to let go of a lot of the bondage of religion and see the world in a new way. It made room for other ideas, and not bad ideas. I'm not talking about like bad things. I'm just talking about I no longer have to be at odds with what it is to be a contemporary human being and to learn in the way that we learn and to know what we know, collectively. So I took it to her and I was like, I want you to come with me. I want us to go on this journey together, and I'm really excited. And it scared her to death, because faith in Jesus to her was the thing that helped her survive. She probably would say that she might not even have made it had it not been for that moment of change that she shared, a little while ago. Yeah. So it scared her. And our relationship became kind of divergent at that point.
You were on two different paths.
On two different paths, yeah. We were kind of here, but I look back, were we really kind of here? I don't know, kind of. Yeah. But then she kind of stayed the course, because her faith had always been exactly that, a faith, something that came in. And my faith was wrapped up in my upbringing, and
I see.
My family culture, my comfort in the church. So I'm going on this journey over here, and she thinks I'm gone. She thinks, well, the next logical step for him is to not want to be married anymore, to abandoning her.
Because that was your history too.
Yeah.
Well, because at that time in my life, without faith and without God, you have permission to do whatever. Like, it opens the door to things that I'm not okay. And I was to drugs, to other relationships, because in my head, that's how I grew up, and they didn't have faith. And then God gives us this autonomy to choose, and I chose to walk with him, and I chose a life of at all opportunity turning away from that, and not being that way. And so I was scared. I really was afraid. What does this mean for our marriage? What does this mean for our family? In my head, our kids aren't going to be raised in the church.
That was a big deal.
He won't pray with us. And also there were ideals, like the man is the head of the household and he's going to be the leader in the prayer. Like, there were things I thought that's what it was supposed to look like. But I think those are just, they're fear-based and expectations. There are families like that, and that's okay. And that's beautiful. And then there are families like us
that are more egalitarian, perhaps, like in terms of the structure of the way that they see their faith.
Yeah, because there's
it's a little bit more. I know that model, the umbrella kind of model of faith, and how that protects the entire family. And I think it's a beautiful model, but I also don't believe that it discounts her ability to remain true, to hers, and my kind of obligation to go deal with all of this.
With your questions.
Yeah.
Well, and if there's not space in humanity to ask questions, we see it modeled in a story where there were disciples who questioned, and there were people who doubted, and there were people who wanted to see, to know, right? And so there has to be space, but it doesn't discount the difficulty in it, not only for you, but for both of you.
Yeah.
Because from what you've shared with me, this was a hard journey. Oh. It has been difficult. And because of the two paths, but at the same time, what's beautiful to me, and the reason why I asked you to come, is because many people could look at difficulty and say, we're done. And that's not what either one of you chose.
Stop.
Oh, sorry.
We've read the chapters of the book that kind of pertain to our topic today. That I will be devoted is a powerful statement. I have a similar story to the pastor who wrote the book. He's obviously taken it much, much further, and he was called to be a pastor, and I was not. So there's that. But the way that he talked about a part-time faith and a full-time career in the ministry, and the way that he said that he kind of replaced a faith life with a life of, let's call it religion, or whatever is appropriate, of doing the things that make you good at what you do, but not having much of a commitment to the other. That I will be devoted. Also, there were times that she stayed true to that devotion, and I saw that, and I saw her heart, breaking for the things that she felt like we would never have because of my journey. Things like praying together, things like waking up in the morning and maybe reading together, be it the Bible or some sort of journal or whatever. Things like she mentioned, and a big one here is how are our kids going to be? How are we going to bring them up? How are they going to be raised? How are they going to know what I know? Isn't it our job to keep them here? Because I was like, well, there's other, there's different ways to raise a kiddo.
You can still be a good person. And that's kind of
Yeah, and I didn't associate only being Christian with being a good person. I didn't want to do this to be a bad person. I didn't want to do this to go cheat on my wife or to do anything awful. I wanted to, I don't know. I was compelled in such a way that I didn't even need to have a reason for it. It was interesting in and of itself to me. It wasn't so that I could ... you know. But I began to,
that journey.
Yeah, I began to see that in her, and I think it was probably roughly 2018 or 2019, definitely right before the whole COVID thing. It may have been that we were arguing. It may have been that we were talking. I don't remember at that point, but I remember seeing her heart break for what she would never have, or felt like she would never have at that moment. And I told her, you know, you know, divorce is on the table. And it's not because I don't want to be with you. It's not because of another place I want to be. It's because I don't know if I'm ever going to be, you know, I don't know if I'm going to find my way back here. I don't know what that's going to look like. Your turn.
I remember him saying, it's not fair to you.
Yeah.
Because you want, you know, but that's where you have the life that you think it's supposed to look like, and then you have the life and journey that God takes you on and allows you to walk through. And I said, you know, no,
it wasn't what she wanted. She didn't. Right. She wanted what she wanted us. You know, she wanted our relationship, and although I think at that point she wanted what we had, I think if we think about where we are now, that's what.
Yeah.
You
definitely.
You know, and I didn't know at the time either, but that's what I needed too. And I can't say I found my way back. I didn't go back to, you know, if this is the original branch, and I branched out over here. I didn't go, okay, you know, enough's enough. Let me go back here, and we'll go back to where we were. Something happened here, you know. I don't have enough retrospect on that to define it yet. I won't waste everybody's time trying to speculate on that one. I don't know. I don't like defining things. I don't want to say. Why would we say that a journey is over? Isn't that...
That's what I told her when we had coffee that day. I just said, you know, this is one of those places where the story isn't over. We can't put this is the end. And it's not, because you have a whole life that you two are called to live, and a purpose and a destiny. Each of you do, and your family does, and your children do. And it's not over. It's not done. It's not, the story hasn't been wrapped up with a neat, tiny bow and it's off on the shelf. Like, it's evolving and it's changing as you grow. And what I think is so beautiful, and there's so many pieces of this that are so beautiful, but to me, the one that sticks out is that even in this place of hard, you know, you stuck with it.
Yeah.
To the questions, to the giving him space for the questions, and not coming in anger and frustration, but remaining there, right?
Yeah.
So, and walking that journey, but remaining faithful to God in the process on your part, you know, to allow him to have his space that he needs to process and ask the questions and seek. Because the reality is discipleship, like, whatever you decide, whatever anyone decides, you have to count the cost of what that means and what is it truly. Like, it's not a decision you just make haphazardly. It's also not a decision that you walk into just because you were told to, kind of like the way you grew up. I mean, there's a lot of us who grew up in church and grew up in religion. And at some point we have to make that faith, that decision for ourselves. And it has to go from, well, this is what I've always been taught, this is what I've always known, to know this is what I know. Yeah. This is what I know. And I'm not turning to the right or to the left. This is what I know. But there's that space between here and here where we grow and we learn and we ask questions and we seek. And that has got to be so difficult when you had different expectations from the get-go.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. It's interesting because I definitely had a battle at the beginning of all of it. And I had to figure out, where do we stand? What is this? I love this man with all of my being. And he had anger that I didn't understand at that time. And as somebody that grew up in trauma, I took all that and felt like it was all my fault. But then there was a moment where and it was shortly after the divorce conversation where, I wept. That was not an easy conversation. That's not a conversation you ever want to have. It created a lot of doubt and struggle in my life. But I definitely felt God saying, I've got this. It's okay. Don't worry, which is a hard thing for me. I think that's the thing that I have to continuously work on. But I remember one day shortly after that, I felt and I don't know how to say it. I don't know that it came it's just this thing that you just, as you're seeking, as you're trying to seeking understanding, it was, your faith is not contingent upon his faith. Your faith is yours. His is his. Regardless of if you're committed in your marriage, you're going to go through journeys in life. And I feel like all of my upbringing even prepared me for it. He can be where he is, and I'm going to love him and pray for him and really work at not being critical and when I was coming back and say, I'm sorry, I was just scared, because really that's where criticism comes from. There was fear, but I had to constantly pray through it, work through it, battle it, seek, wisdom. And I just clung to, who you are. You know what your experience was when you were 17 years old. And I came to you and loved you. And now you get to love him where he is. And it was a different kind of brokenness that he was experiencing than what I had, but it was also freeing for him to feel like he could ask questions. And I had to put myself in that, okay, if you were raised thinking that you had to do this, and this was just what would you feel? And so I was seeking understanding to what he could possibly be internalizing and feeling. Because Danny he's an internalizer. He's not an external processor like I am. So he's not just talking to me about it all day. I'm having to pull it out. I'm like, what are you feeling? What are you thinking?
I'm like, that's mine. I didn't put it out there. It doesn't belong in the ether yet. I'm not done.
That's exactly.
Yeah.
But, I did feel that your faith is not contingent upon his. And don't waver. And then I had a lady come up to me, Melissa Wilson. She came up to me and she said, Stephanie, and she did not know what we were going through. I didn't talk to anybody about it. She said, I just want you to know, I feel like you're supposed to do church from home. This was before 2020. Right before, but still, I didn't know everything was going to shut down eventually.
Right.
But she said, I feel like you're supposed to do church from home. And so on Sundays, thankfully, Beltway does broadcast, and we would Danny actually started to turn it on Sundays for me, because I was going to stay with my family and do church with my family and just love my family right where we are in the mess, of whatever life looks like. And, we would turn it on and we would listen and we'd just go about our day. And then we'd, on Sundays,
talk about stuff.
And we would talk about it.
Yeah. Spur conversation between
us. It would definitely spark conversation between us.
And I think it helped her. It gave us a little bit of a middle ground to where I could talk about stuff that I,
Sure.
without just being, way out here in left field, scaring her to death. We could talk based on maybe what, Pastor David or whatever was talking about, that, and how do I feel about it? How do you feel about it?
And I would say, I would be like, oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting perspective. That's just not the experience that I had with God. It's so different.
Which was cool for me because I'm like, well, you lucky dog. What do you mean that's not the experience you had? That's the experience everybody had with God. Come on, growing up in the 90s, we all had the same experience. No, totally joking, but yeah.
Those things that he would talk about that he was upset about, it was like, can I tell you my perspective on that? Like this is how I see time in Scripture, because a lot of it, like he said, was science and, not a lot of it. That was just part of it, but it would irritate him. And I was like, well, I don't necessarily see it that way. Even if that's how people say it, it does talk about in Scripture how a day is like 1,000, or, like 1,000 years or something. I can't remember off the top of my head, but we were sitting there looking at it and I was like, what if, because we don't have all the answers. That's the thing. You don't have all the ansers. And that was another thing I had to come to is I don't have all the answers.
I think on that, I became through a decade long, this wasn't just a couple of months of poking around and going, it was 10 years, I think 10 or 11 years at this point that I have been on this journey. That I knew much more about faith before the journey and much less about what we know collectively as a civilization, because I had shunned a lot of that. And now I know a little bit more about that and realize I don't really belong in that world because I can't, it is way, but I know a little bit more about that, enough to keep life interesting. But I know so much less about faith, and I like it so much better. I like not having to have these concrete answers come through the realm of my life that should be set apart for something different. That both can be meaningful. That this human, experience that we get the opportunity to live. They don't have to be equal. They don't have to be in competition.
Right.
And I don't have to go to this one resource and make everything about faith some sort of concrete answer about the world I live in. And I don't have to go to science and try to figure out, where did all this come from? Science, you can't answer that yet. Maybe ever. I don't know. We don't know. We can't see that far. But but this over here can give me peace about it, and I don't need an answer. I like the nature of this is much more interesting to me now than it used to be, because my expectation of it is different.
And wow. I wanted Danny to be in my life, right? Like I didn't want him out of my life. And there was this thing when my faith is not contingent upon his, that came in, like where, this term, and I don't remember where it came from. You might remember refencing.
Oh, I do remember.
So he lived, at this point, like Christians can sometimes put up this boundary and this fence. And anybody that lives different than me is not welcome in my...
Be they from other religions, be they from other
lifestyles. Not welcome in my fence, right? But Jesus, I think, wants us to tear down that fence. I think he wants us to love others where they are. Absolutely. Just like he did for me. And so, that's kind of that turmoil and that conflict and that tension was, what do I do with this? Well, you refence, and that if Danny is where he is, but he's now outside this fence, there's no definition, right? We didn't define the relationship, and now we don't have a definition for what, like, what does that look like for me? And so the idea of just refencing.
You don't tear the fence down, because that's a big job, but you can take and this one person that might be part of a they, in your world, like their ideology, the way they see life as opposed to the way I see. But then you develop a relationship with that person, and you refence around the one individual you're now comfortable with, gives you a way to take the fence down entirely and be there for
the
people.
relationship.
Yeah, and build relationship with people like that person that you.
Well, we
you
saw
did
Jesus
refence
do
around.
it.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. That's what Jesus taught us. And that made sense to me. Like relationship. That's how people were able to reach me in that restaurant with that meal.
Because you were outside of their fence.
I was out. Yeah. I was the unchurched youth.
Yeah.
I was the unchurched youth.
Ambush.
And
They
so
ambushed you.
They ambushed me with the love of Christ. But that's what he was all about, is relationship. Yeah. And relationships are messy.
They are.
And
and this journey of like what the days we get on this earth, it's messy there too, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And we don't know always where our journey is going to take us, and it's a long one. Hopefully, for many of us, it's a long journey, but it may not always look like we thought.
Yeah.
And what I want to know, though, is we've talked about the hardship, we've talked about the sacrifices, we've talked about remaining devoted to one another, and also giving space for each other in your journeys. But I think, Stephanie, my question for you is, there are families and couples out there who are navigating something very similar when it comes to challenges within the family, when someone, maybe a partner or a child or somebody, one is devoted and the other isn't, still exploring, still unsure, questioning. That process is not a day.
Yeah.
Oftentimes it's a journey. How would you encourage someone that's in that space? How would you encourage them today?
Obviously love them. Relationship is number one. But, I just recently kind of, I heard this quote, and it said, rules without relationship equals rebellion. And if we're trying to help teach people rules that are not bad rules, they're loving, they're good, they will bring great things in your life, but we don't have a relationship with them, they're not going to hear. We have to work on the heart and the relationship and loving unconditionally right where you are in the mess, and see the beauty in it.
Well, that's reflecting the heart of the Father too, because that's exactly what he gives us space for.
Yes.
He gives us space for the messy, and he enters our mess.
Yeah.
And he takes ashes and makes things beautiful. That's just the nature of our God, because he's the Redeemer.
Yes.
He redeems things. That's just what he does. And so,
also
go ahead.
say, your impulse may be to run, from
the hard.
this
Yes.
hard stuff,
Yes.
We flee. That's why we survive. We flee, or we team up and conquer. That's how human beings survive, right? And our impulse, our natural inclination is to, that's uncomfortable. I have every reason to run. Don't yet. I mean, there may be circumstances that make it a unique situation. I don't know, abuses and stuff like that. But I mean, if you're living out a story similar to ours, I would just say don't knee jerk. Don't use something as an opportunity to run to something else that you think is better, because truly it doesn't exist. It's not there. It's a mirage out on the horizon that you're seeing as something,
A way of escape.
A way of escape, yeah. So resist that impulse and like make it. I've gotta give credit to Jeremy Curls at one point. I'm playing on the worship team. I'm opening books that in my mind the church would not want me to open, And I went to him and I said, "Bud, you probably don't want me on your worship team anymore." In the prayer room, right back over here. And I was at a point where I was angry, like what she said. And I said, I'm not mad at you or any, I'm going through a thing, and I need you to know where I am. And he said, I understand that. God understands that. We all have room to go on a journey. I can't wait to to hear more about your journey. You're still part of our community here. You are welcome to play until you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Until you feel like, and I was like, are you kidding me? Why would you not take, I'm telling you, are you listening to what I'm saying? You're like, I no longer feel like I don't belong on the platform of a church right now. Like, you know what I mean? He's like, you do, you know, you're still one of us, and we're your community, and we, you know, and he used the word journey, and that was the first time I had associated the word journey with the journey that I was on, you know. I was like, yeah, journey. It became very meaningful after he
That's sweet.
helped me
see it that way.
See it that way.
Can I ask a question? And this is more vulnerable than if you want to skip it, totally cool.
Yeah, I'm going to go to the bathroom. So.
Okay, go for it.
He tells a lot of dad jokes.
Okay, well, I haven't heard a dad joke yet, so.
That was one of them.
Oh,
He's like, I'm going to go to the
that
bathroom.
was just, I don't know what kind of, we don't like definitions, remember?
Yeah,
don't like definitions. I know we've talked about this long 10-year journey. Where are you today with things, with faith, with the Lord? I know you guys are in a healthy spot in your marriage, and I'm so thankful for that. And I think it's beautiful. You have a beautiful family. You're doing incredible things in our community. So thank you for the ways that you're fighting for the one. The ones that are having hard times, the hard ones to love, and the ones who are in difficult spaces. But yeah, can you kind of give us an update? Where are you today?
I wish I could encapsulate it in a pretty way that helped everybody see that the end of the story has been written.
Yeah.
You know, write that final chapter and close the book and feel good. You know, I have a hard time with that question. I'm softer to the idea of a new kind of faith.
Yeah.
I don't know. I may get I may get saved and baptized again someday. I don't know. I don't know what that would look like. It could be that I never say another word about it. You know, in terms of defining, you know, myself. I know we're here and we're kind of showing up. We're you know, listening and talking, and
the dialogue is open.
The dialogue is open. And what I went through alone, just with me and books and no other human being, I told that story about Jeremy. He may have been one of the only people I ever even opened up to about it. I had podcasts and stuff like that. Now I don't feel like I have to do it in that part of my life anymore. I feel like I have, you know, people in a community, and I'm comfortable enough with where I am to talk about it without feeling like, well, people are just going to yell at me and try to make me prove a thing. I don't want to sit here and like defend a thing. I don't care about all that. So I'm here, you know.
I'm glad you're here.
I'm here. I'm sitting on a pod. I wouldn't have been here even 5 years ago. I would have not sat on I would have had an agenda.
Yeah.
You know, I would have had, you know, I would have still been processing
you were
some
in
of
a
that
different
anger,
place.
that deconstruction. I'm not deconstructing anything anymore. I'm trying to figure out what to do with the pieces that I've been deconstructed. You know, what deserves to be put back together, what deserves to be discarded. You know, in terms of where I was and where I'm going.
Yeah.
I'd say I'm rebuilding.
That's
good. Yeah.
And I think the beauty of it is the posture is open. I remember recently, it actually wasn't recent. It was maybe a couple of years ago. I remember Mother's Day. He said, hey, we're going to wake up and go to church in the morning. And he didn't do that because he wanted to go. He did that because he wanted to honor my heart. And it was like when we were finally kind of coming out of the church at home and, you know, trying to figure it out again. But I remember that opening, and I remember how special it was. I remember crying. I remember feeling valued, like he valued.
There was space for both.
The space that I'm in, because there were several times in the beginning where he would criticize or, and not to be mean, but
you're right.
Like he would criticize where I was, and I would cry. I would sit there and feel stupid, like feel, well, I still can't deny him. Right. I still cannot deny Jesus and what he did in my life, even if it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't make sense, because it made sense to me. And I can't deny the love and the relationship and all of that I felt all those years ago and that continued on. And, God even used Danny in my life for a lot of healing. And I know that Danny was angry with all of the things that I went through as a child. I remember him having to process that too.
Yeah.
And so I think some of it was protection and love also. But the beautiful part is we've stuck it out. We've stayed devoted. And I
love that. Yeah.
Have not had to, we have tattoos that say stay. And the stay for us, it means a lot of things. It's the journey. It's life's not done. It's the marriage. It's with the children. Stay the course. There's so many things that means to us. And we're so glad now. It was hard it was hard in the middle. Very hard. But we're so glad we've done it.
I've got one more question for you, and then we need to wrap up. But Stephanie, I wanted to know if you could give advice to someone who is, do you give advice to a spouse who is seeking ways to encourage their partner in this place of questioning, in this place of hard, without without causing strain in the relationship? How would you tell a spouse or a partner and encourage them in that way? Just because you want to encourage the devotion piece, but it's hard. It's a hard balance because you don't want to cause tension in the space of processing and giving that space.
What did I do?
Stay. If you were to encourage a spouse,
I think it's okay to be vulnerable.
Okay.
Seek wisdom from, if people are, there have been people on this journey that I did open up to, and they did encourage us to not stay together, or me. You got to leave. Y'all aren't equally yoked, right? Like there have been people. Don't seek and listen to people who are not for.
I could say you can listen to them. I mean, you're not going to not hear what they have to say.
That's a hard question. Sorry.
Yeah, you, and people aren't going to say perfect things. I mean, when somebody passes away tragically and somebody says, well, it was all part of God's plan, and you get angry with that person because you were like, well, I don't want to have anything to do with that, God, because you have no idea how that feels, and it doesn't make me feel better for you to come to me and say that. They didn't intend to hurt you. Yeah. They're just trying to connect with you. Yeah. But so you have to hear them, but categorize it in your mind. Okay, yeah, I've heard, things like that before, equally yoked. Okay, let me think about what that means to me. I'm not going to knee jerk on, this language, sounds Christian enough. I better listen because it sounds like the Bible. I better listen. You go ahead and categorize it and ask yourself, well, what does that mean to my situation? Don't respect them. They mean well. They mean well. They want the best for you. They just want it to. They're hurting for you.
Yeah.
I think when you're seeking in those moments that are difficult, none of it's easy. None of it's easy. Staying isn't easy. Leaving isn't easy. It's not going to be easy. So if that's the carrot that's dangling over your head, You've got to ask yourself, am I just looking for easy? Am I just looking for comfort? And if that's the case, then you just have to seek the Lord and pray, because you just need to understand none of it's easy. In fact, the scripture that I just cling to is, I mean, there's several in Psalms, and then there's several, but one in James that I actually read, that I didn't read it, I said it this morning. Consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kind, because it is a testing of your faith, which develops perseverance, and perseverance must finish its work, so that you may be complete, mature, not lacking in anything. And I see every challenge and every opportunity for growth as an opportunity to mature. And you can't experience true joy unless you've gone through true heartache.
Yeah.
And, you know, whether this is the kind of heartache you go through, or whatever hard you're going through in life, remember that joy is always there.
Yeah.
You know, you just have to tap into it, and joy comes from the Lord. And, you know, life is not a tragedy.
It's a gift.
It's a gift. Yeah. It's a gift, and it's beautiful. And I'm just so glad we stayed.
Thank you guys so much for coming in and having a conversation with me today. I so appreciate it. Blessings to you and your family, and I pray that this time is given back to you, because this was a long conversation. Thanks so much, you guys, for listening and watching the Beyond Sundays podcast. We hope you guys have a fantastic day. Be blessed. Remember, God is always moving, and He's moving in your life too, and in your story. Beyond Sundays. We'll see you next time. Bye.